welcome everybody from my part as well. I'm Jari Kupiainen from Karelia University of Applied Sciences from Joensuu, Finland, and I'm going to give you a short introduction to the Living Labs thematics. But before starting, I must express my slight disappointment to the situation that you won't be able to see my face in video, or actually me in the video, because just for the purpose I put a new shirt. I thought it would look nice in the video screen, but sorry about it, you cannot see that now. But that's a slight disappointment only. Okay, let's commence. So what is a living lab? I'm sure all of you have heard the concept already at some point. It's something that was worked as a research concept for innovation at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology some 10 years ago. And the idea is that it's a kind of a user-centered open innovation ecosystem. And it's placed in a real-life environment. So we are not talking about laboratories, but actual real-life environment where things are being tested and tried. And the idea is really to employ real-life users of different products and different services into these innovation processes, which are, well, traditionally this has been the sole sort of domain of companies and organizations doing these innovations and working on new products and services. But now the idea is to employ the actual end users into this process. Well, when they started at the MIT, the idea sort of spread very quickly, not only in the United States and North America, but also to Europe and even elsewhere. And there was a certain boom in Finland as well, probably around the years 2010 to 2013-14. And it's still continuing. So we have continuous sort of examples and cases of living labs here in Finland, even right now. But the basic idea is to sort of create and establish a new kind of a partnership around these innovation processes, and it's a private, public and people partnership. So we would have companies, we would have public organizations, and then we would have ordinary people in this sort of consolidation we're talking about. And it's all about co-creation, it's about exploration, experimentation and evaluation. These are sort of hot topics and key words for the sort of living lab ecosystems and living lab sort of ideology, we might say. So what are the basic components of a living lab? I've listed a few. First of all, there's the user orientation, so that those people who are actually going to use those products and services, they are involved in an active way in this whole innovation process. And it's revolutionary. Not perhaps today, but when this idea originally was introduced, it sort of drastically changed many aspects of innovation processes in companies and organizations. And it actually brought the much wanted realism into these processes. Another basic component is the idea of an open innovation. And here the aim is to improve innovation process by opening it to actors outside of the organization or company. Well, this is already obvious as you figure out, but the basic motivation here is the search of new ideas, but also, well, companies, organizations, they usually come up with a pile of ideas that they actually are not using or utilizing or developing further. And these ideas might well be quite plausible for some other business or some other organization. And this Living Lab framework provides the opportunity to distribute our own unused ideas to others who would probably better utilize them. And this Living Lab sort of establishes and creates a kind of an ecosystem of its own. It involves the users, it involves the utilizers, the developers, the enablers, and the operator. I'll be opening these themes in a later slide, but this is the sort of ecosystem that we're talking about when in relation to the living labs. So there are different actors here. And as has been repeated already, it's all about the real life environment. This is not a laboratory, but a normal, ordinary living environment where people do their things, where they work, where they are living, the houses, and where they play. So this is the basic framework. But a real life environment can also be found in the internet, and we have had a tremendous series of great examples of mass collaboration projects recently. We've probably started from the open source software movement with Linux and stuff, but nowadays we have so much more. The Wikipedia is a great example of such collaboration projects. Now the hot topic is crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. These all belong to a kind of a basic framework of living labs as well. So this kind of mass collaboration projects in the internet can also be approached through the living lab ideology. Okay, the living lab actors. So I mentioned the users. These are people who are using the products and services in ordinary everyday environment, and these users, they should have the ability to provide honest and open feedback. You know, not every user will be able to do that. So we would need quality users, so to speak, when organizing a living lab in this sense. And these users, they can actually represent a number of different roles, and these roles can be switched. The same person can actually present several different roles at specific points of activities. The users can be residents of an area or a city or even a nation, well, the citizens as well. The users can be employees in companies or organizations. They can be students, they could be tourists or visitors, and so forth. So there are different roles that can be utilized by users in this living lab framework. Then another component, another actor group are the utilizers. And these are companies or organizations who are actually using this living lab framework for their research, development, innovation processes, which actually relate to their own products and services. So they are the beneficiaries of these activities. And sometimes these utilizers can take up specific roles in the activities, and they can be quite active in the process as a whole. Okay, the third group of actors in living labs are the developers. And these are, for example, it can be an educational institution, a university, a school, or a research institute, and so forth, or it can be a company. But the idea is that these developers, they provide methods, tools, and resources for the living lab case at hand. And the idea is to collect data and also to collect new ideas and sort of their reflections. And living lab cases may be commissioned, so there is the sort of business angle here as well. Or the a developer may be quite active in participating in the case, and they could actually bring their own end users into the case and the living lab and utilize them this way as well. So there are different opportunities here. The next group of actors are the enablers, and this can be a public organization, say a city administration or governmental organization or ministry or whatever. These are the ones who don't actually participate actively in living lab activities, but they are the ones who provide the framework and the infrastructure where these activities could actually be developed and done. And they support these activities in various, usually administrative ways. And these enablers are really important at the point when a living lab case is being set up. So the early phases of the living lab activity really needs and sort of acquires these enablers to make these things happen. So it's all about goodwill, so to speak, coming from these enablers. And then there is, in the end, there is the operator who controls the ecosystem and provides its rules, how the living lab is managed and what can be done and what cannot be done within its framework. The operator also organizes and manages the cases and also takes care of the business related to these cases, making the contracts and arranging things. They also manage the user database and organize and manage the development activities with users. So in the end, the operator is quite important. Sometimes when living labs are not organized in with big money or with good resources, but done in a sort of minor way or in a minor key, then the operator can be sort of assimilated into the developers or the utilizers group, and these can be mixed in specific activities. But when the sort of full-blown living lab case is being done, usually there is an operator at the back of it, controlling things. Okay, then the next slide will be a brief look at the research methods used in these living lab cases and activities. There's a variety of research methods and research approaches and research interests that could be sort of utilized or employed in these research activities. The typical examples that are commonly used is the sociological approach, action research. Then there are these different kinds of design-related approaches, user-centered design, participatory design, especially service design, which is for us Finns has been quite important recently. Then there's a lot of sort of experience research, usability research, application research, especially by IT interests that can be sort of involved in these research activities. But it's very common that these living lab activities are actually documented through ethnographic field documentation methods. It's common to have video, audio recordings of these user activities and the activities in living lab, how people are actually doing things in a real life situation. This is documented and recorded. Of course, participant observation where the researchers hang on with the actors and the users and make observation, try things themselves, get sort of phenomenological experiences of these things and so forth. And a common method of data collection in these activities is so-called situated interviewing, which doesn't mean a full-blown interview situation where people are recorded and a long list of questionnaires are gone through, but this kind of situated interviewing is much more ad hoc. It's kind of a informal way of discussing things when they happen and documenting them in the site. And then user diaries, and also the researchers can keep diaries for their observations, and these kind of materials accumulate during these research activities when living lab activities are documented. So as you can figure out, the research data that comes out from these kind of methods, and the very approach sort of focuses mainly on qualitative data and highlights the variety of individual experiences, individual observations, and individual ideas of users. The data is heterogenic. It's not easily sort of compatible for statistical analysis. There might not be enough cases, or it's not statistically representative, and so forth. There are different issues that come in the way of sort of quantitative data analysis here. And the emphasis, as I said, is on a qualitative analysis of this data. And this is, it's not that self-evident, and some of these methods, they really have to be sort of learned by these researchers just for the purpose, because oftentimes such methods, they have to be sort of hand-picked and tuned in to fit into this kind of living lab environment. It's not just simply to pick up a qualitative method from methods arsenal and just employ it blindfold, but you have to adjust the methods fitting into this living lab environment. Well, then I have a few example cases from my own university, Karelia University of Applied Sciences, of living lab projects and approaches that we've done in the last few years. And the first one that we had was called Living Lab for Design and Services, which took place from 2008 until 2010. And this actually was the first project to introduce living lab activity in this whole region, and especially Joensuu and our university. And from then on, things started to sort of spread and accumulate. The first focus was on user-centered and service design, and this first project also achieved a membership status in the European Network of Living Labs, nowadays represented by Laura University of Applied Sciences in Finland. All right, then this Living Lab for Design and Services was continued with an international project called Life 2.0 from 2011 to 13. It was a EU project with 13 partners from a number of countries, I think 5 countries, and the focus was on services for elderly people with the idea to support independent living, so that people wouldn't need to be moving to old people homes, but they could continue with their own houses and a way of life as earlier. And in the project, they developed an online platform, website, so to speak, for elderly people's peer-to-peer communication. The website provided sort of tools for everyday problem solving. There were platforms for announcements, service offers, events, and also a marketplace where things could be bought and sold. And there was a certain success and certain set of activities that continued after the project, and we considered this kind of a successful one here in Joensuu at least. I'm not sure about the other partners and how it went elsewhere, but we were quite happy with this project and its results. Okay, the next one, the next attempt that we did in the Living Lab framework was the project called Everyday Users as Innovators, this AKI Living Lab project from 2011 to 13, which had a focus on tourism services development and especially the tourist experience. There was a lot of emphasis on this sort of how to work on that experience, how it could be better serviced and how it could be developed. There were a number of experimental methods and pilot cases that were tried, and they especially related to event organizing and wider tourism development organizations in the region. We have this sort of regional tourism promotion company, Karelia Expert, which was important as a partner as well. In Joensuu, we have one of the oldest rock festivals in the whole of Europe, and it's one of the biggest in Finland as well. It's called Ilosaari Rock, and we had a Ilosaari Rock Festival a visitor study made by this Aki Living Lab project, and the project also organized a regular Cafe Joensuu sort of setting and a place in downtown Joensuu where this Living Lab way of thinking was promoted and introduced to the general public, and also tourist service packages were developed to promote tourism in the region. The project also produced a mobile application for this Ilosaari Rock Festival, and also a shopper's guide for Joensuu, for the Joensuu area. Yet another project that we had in this field was the Learning Lab for Accessibility in Built Environment, which was a quite large project and involved a big partner network from not only from Finland but also from the Russian Karelia, especially Petrozavodsk and Kostamus. This network consisted of a number of Finnish universities and a large group of business partners, and then also the educational institutions like Karelia here in Joensuu arranging things, and some public organizations in the Russian side. There was data collection and analysis of accessibility in built environments that were documented and analyzed not only in the Russian side but also in the Finnish side. How public buildings, built public areas, how are they accessible for, say, for handicapped people or people with inabilities to move around, or for example, problems with eyesight and so forth. And this kind of documentation has, after this project, it actually has been utilized in public space development and new sort of solutions, how public space and public buildings are being sort of constructed and how they are actually operating nowadays. There were education modules for relevant sort of interest groups developed, and materials, publications, and also a cooperative model development for further activities of this kind were developed in this project. And this was a rather groundbreaking one in terms of international development in the Russian side, because this kind of thinking, Living Lab thinking, it's altogether new for Russians, at least at that point was, and it is only now being spread and being wider introduced in the Russian side, and we will probably see further such activities in the future, okay, depending on the politics anyhow. And the last Living Lab activity project that we've done was done in the last 2 years with the European Social Fund funding, partnering with the Joensuu Science Park Living Lab, and in that Rapid Experimental Development Services project we developed a particular environment, so-called Sirkkala Factory, at one of our campuses here in Karelia, and this Sirkkala Factory is a multi-purpose environment for innovation and design activities with all sorts of infra supporting this, and it's a kind of a regular use right now in our university. It's integrated into several study programs in the university curriculum. travel and tourism, design, media studies, especially those are the ones who regularly use the Sirkala factory for their own innovation and development activities. And the basic idea was to do quick, fast and experimental sort of innovation activities for particular projects, particular needs, particular companies, and so that there wouldn't be too much effort or energy spent on something that would not work later on. But we would actually do a quick test whether it's functioning or not, whether it's promising or not, and if not, then we would just skip and take the next idea and work on that. So it provided us with this kind of an working framework. So these are the ones that we've done here in Joensuu so far. I made a short list of some additional internet resources where you could find more about these living labs. There are actually some quite useful sources, especially the publication listed first, the Eskelinen, Robles and so forth, guidebook, Citizen-Driven Innovation. I warmly recommend this for all of you. It's very useful and very accessible one, and you can find the full publication in the internet, published by the World Bank this year. And another a great resource for the themes is the last one, Technology Innovation Management Review, special issue on living labs from 3 years ago, September 2012. So there's a full refereed journal about living labs. Very interesting, very useful, high quality articles there. So this was my contribution. Thank you for listening, and I hope you didn't get too bored. So, and if you have any questions, comments, I'm here ready to answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jari. Yeah, we will just have the questions on the chat board here on the site, and if you can just repeat the question and then answer.
Okay, there's at least the one from your experience. What are your recommendations and mistakes to avoid in order to make the process effective and the services products tested in a living up environment can be formally adapted and expanded to the rest of the users? Well, this was a kind of a say positive-oriented representation of living labs. I didn't sort of go too deeply into the challenges that relate to this kind of approach, and one of them is that this is kind of a labor-intensive activity, so that if you want to organize a living lab and document what's going on in there, you would actually have to employ some manpower to do the documentation, whether it's the students or somebody else. It's labor-intensive. These activities, it's not enough to come in for a while, maybe 2 hours, and document what's going on in there, but you actually need to hang on with these people, the users, much longer and document the different situations that come up during the day or even the evening or even the night in these living lab environments and sort of activities there. So it's labor intensive, and I also sort of implied that also the analysis of the accumulating data is not that simple, and it's not always sort of very representative, but it's very case specific. So you cannot easily generalize on the basis of your observations from one living lab case only, but you need to actually sort of have some data from several different kinds of living labs to sort of build a generalization how these things sort of go on. And well, in the beginning I sort of made the point that the kind of a heyday and the most popular period of organizing these living labs was maybe from 2010 to 2013 or even last year, but there is a certain kind of fading of this methodology. At the moment, there might be several reasons in addition to this labor-intensive aspect of living labs. An important factor here in Finland, sort of cutting down these living lab activities, is the economic recession and the government's drastic cuts in different research, development and educational activities. The different universities in Finland are right now in a dire situation where they are actually cutting down the number of teachers and cutting down resources and all sorts of setbacks to the sort of usual activities that we've used to have and do in our universities. Now we're sort of adapting to a new situation where we would have to be operating with far less resources than we've used to. So this is a challenge, at least in Finland, and what I know of the other countries in Europe, I would imagine it's kind of similar elsewhere as well. I hope this is a sufficient answer to your first questions. Any others? Did you hear me? Was this a sufficient answer, Jose, for your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I was writing another one, if you allow me, but I think Unan is also writing.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Yeah, thank you very much for the response.
And nothing's come up yet. Okay. Do you think that there are any particular sectors where the living lab approach is easier to implement than others? Well, I would imagine that it would be easier to set up a living lab involving public organizations than private companies, especially when the sort of the objective would be the private companies in innovations and improved products or improved services that would result from these activities. We would still be dealing with sort of disclosure issues, so that private companies would want to maintain their innovation processes private, so that they are not that sort of keen or interested in involving outsiders within their own innovation activities or project development or services development activities. So it is kind of a challenge to get these private companies involved. Public ones are much easier to work with. Is that sufficient answer? Okay, next question. Is there any research into automation of processes within a living lab ecosystem so that it can sustain itself and reduce the labor-intensive element and data analytics? Well, it's basically, upon the actors how to operate the whole thing. If you're lazy in documentation, you could still have the activities running normally, following the basic procedure, but you just miss parts of its documentation. That way you can cut down the labor intensity there, and therefore you wouldn't be collecting that much data. I would not put all the stakes in automated data collection solutions, because that would be a technical solution, and it would mean that we would basically employ technology instead of actual human beings, trained human beings with skills to observe and analyze what's going on. Technology just indiscriminately documents what's ever available, and whether that's relevant or not, you cannot really be sure. And how to interpret the data unless you have the chance to sort of reflect on the materials with the informants or the users, it's yet an open issue then. So you can arrange living labs with more or less formalization, and there's variety in the way how you actually organize these things. And sometimes basic activities that people do in their lives could be labeled a living lab in a suitable condition, so that you wouldn't actually find much sort of living lab elements in the situation. People are just doing their everyday things. Maybe they are testing or analyzing or commenting or trying some new ideas or working on them or trying to figure out how they function and so on in the side. But well, there's plenty of variety how to formalize these things in living labs. And my recommendation is that when you formalize things too much, then you would lose some of the sort of spontaneity of these activities, and therefore the observations might not be what you really want, but it's rather observations that the users might think that you would like to have these kind of observations. So they think on behalf of you, so to speak. So my answer here is that I would not place all the sort of focus on technical documentation processes or automation of living labs in that sense, so that we would be analyzing log data or some automated visual data information from cameras or whatever. But it's not really the approach unless you have the real people there making observations and analyzing things in a real life situations. Well, the limitations, are there any particular limitations to the living labs approach you would highlight? Well, I've highlighted a few already. The labor intensity, also the aspects of data collected through qualitative methods, so that they cannot easily be generalized, or they don't sort of give in to statistical analysis very easily. So these are some of the sort of limitations, and also how to really involve and make the different partners in this living lab committed to the activity. People might be enthusiastic in the first day or in the first meeting, but when things start running and things sort of move into a kind of a living lab everyday situation, then a number of partners might easily lose their sort of active interest, and they hang on in the side only. So this actually, the whole approach needs the true commitment of the different parties. Otherwise, it's not going to function properly. Well, another thing is that the activities in the living lab, they should be meaningful to the users. They should be something that it's not that they don't consider artificial, or something that's given upon them from the outside without they wanting it at all or anything like that. So the inner motivation of the users, it's kind of a crucial here, and they should feel that they actually consider themselves as active partners in this whole affair, rather than some sort of necessary element that has to be tolerated so that the companies would get the results. This is altogether a wrong approach to a living lab activity. Yeah, resources are important, but I would not put that on the first place. The true commitment of the different parties is much more important. You can actually do a living lab without real resources as well, and you can actually find examples of this from the Internet Mass Collaboration projects, which sometimes are not funded at all, but are based on the activity of the participants only. So you can arrange these things in many different ways, and you should not always focus on the resources only, or cash money, so to speak, but it's much more important to have the sort of will and the motivation of the different partners. That's the key issue. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me and this boring talk, but I hope you found something interesting in it anyhow.